Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Radcast. I am happy to be joined by my colleague and co-host, Michael, in the south of France. How you doing there, Michael?
I'm doing well, Jamin. The world could be better, and that's why we're here.
Exactly. We want to make the world better. We want to save life on Earth. So we have an agenda I'd like to show. Let me just do a quick screen share, and I'll show the agenda I propose, which is first that we review kind of a draft manifesto, a very early draft of some ideas we've been kicking around. And then I'm going to talk about a proposed framework for exactly what we need to focus on in order to refreeze the Arctic in time. That's the first priority. And then a first crack at a new story for humanity. And then a few words about solutions, and then open discussion from there. And by the way, everyone is welcome to join this video conference. I don't care who you are. I don't care if we've never met before or don't even know of each other's existence. You are welcome to join this video conference and be a part of the conversation. Our philosophy is kind of like a global campfire, right? Let's get everyone together.
Yeah.
And do this. So feel free to join. The link is posted on my Facebook page, on my Google Plus page, and the link to actually join and be one of us on the video conference. And of course, if you're just on my YouTube channel, you can just be watching, and that's fine too, of course. All right.
And Jamin, before you actually start the introduction to the manifesto, as you've outlined it, do you mind if when you get to that point, if I introduce it with some prose?
Oh, I would love that. In fact, since that's the first item on the agenda, why don't you go ahead and do that? I'll go on mute. And though I don't think we've got too bad echo. Are you getting any echo on your end?
Oh, I'm not. Are you getting an echo?
No, I'm not. I think we're good. I don't think we need to worry about muting. Okay, so no, you fire away, Michael. Yeah.
Sure. So this is an introduction to the bullet points. Even as Earth's climate is changing ever more abruptly, life itself is endangered. We are now witnessing the fifth mass extinction event in the perilous journey of our planet. Human history may be told in many ways, but one above all forms the horizon of meaning for the other narratives, the plausible, some say probable extinction of life on Earth because of Homo sapiens. We are the probable cause and potential solution of the planetary problem, abrupt climate change. The modality of modern society is driven by a machine or system that functions as a sort of heat engine which, to simply state the facts, is currently changing the climate at an accelerating rate. The system in question is that of an economy of hoarding, wherein capital, data, information, and private property is amassed by plutocrats at the exorbitant expense of both the people and the planet. The most prosperous country, for instance, produces the most carbon emissions and income inequality in the world. Hoarding impoverishes people on the planet. The paradigm of scarcity causes anxiety, protectionism, and fascism. In order for society to feel free, there must be a sense of abundance, an economy of sharing. And this economic revolution and the people must take place along with, at the same time as, an ecological regeneration of the planet. That's the bottom line. So that's just a little introductory bit of rhetoric.
Yep.
Which is going to include the bullet points that you've outlined.
Okay, wonderful. I love it. Great stuff, Michael. By the way, we cannot see you video-wise.
That's because I was reading the.
Okay. No worries. Okay, very good. So No, I really, I love what you just said. No, I wouldn't change a word myself. So with that, shall I dive into the kind of draft bulleted manifesto?
Yes.
Not really a draft manifesto, but just sort of bullets to support the
Yeah.
same. Okay, great. Here goes. So, can you see the Word document okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, draft
Perfect.
manifesto. I'll just start reading. And if I cough from time to time, please excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. All right. First draft of humanity, for a number of evolutionary and historical reasons, currently finds herself trapped in a modality of life characterized by fear, including fear of scarcity, separation, experiencing ourselves as separate from others, separate from nature, ego, greed and hoarding, depression, despondence, and myriad life destroying patterns centered around making it, surviving in what is increasingly a dangerous, psychotically cruel world. Let's call this current modality hoarding to give it a one word name, however imperfect, and better candidate words are welcome. Hoarding is destroying Mother Earth, her species, ecosystems, and life supporting systems. The byproducts of this hoarding modality include overpopulation, destruction of the biosphere, mass extinction, and abrupt climate change, destruction of the world's life supporting systems, for example, the Arctic ice, the atmosphere, the oceans, etc. Driven by this modality of hoarding, humanity has effectively become a rapidly growing cancer on Mother Earth, rapidly destroying virtually everything, including all life. We envision and advocate for humanity undergoing a radical transformation in our very modality of life, from hoarding to sharing, sharing with each other and with Mother Earth. The most urgent form of sharing is sharing with Mother Earth our abilities, skills, and tools for refreezing the Arctic. And in parallel, likewise sharing the best of humanity for healing, restoring, regenerating the myriad ecosystems and life supporting systems of Mother Earth, which, like the Arctic ice, have been pushed far beyond the sustainable limit of abuse. In order to do this work, including transforming our very modality of life to such a modality of sharing, we advocate for a series of smaller transformations, the sum of which equates to the big transformation we need to survive. The series of smaller transformations. Phase 1, come together. Phase 2, let's get smart. And I'll go into a little bit of detail on this below. Phase 2, let's get smart. Phase 3, refreeze the Arctic. Phase 4, more coming together. Phase 5, let's get smarter still. Phase 6, heal Mother Earth as we transform our modality of life and our entire set of living arrangements. Some details on the series of smaller transformations. Phase 1, come together. Oh, by the way, Michael, I just wanted to mention, I'm going to be getting a phone call from Guy, possibly any minute now. So anyway, if that happens, I'm just going to take it for a few minutes and just kind of go on pause. But you feel free to carry the music.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so phase 1, come together. Well, this is happening already and will accelerate as natural disasters continue worldwide. It won't happen on its own, as forces will drive humans to fight each other over remaining dwindling resources. So we must orchestrate this coming together. It's not just going to happen automatically. Okay, phase 2, let's get smart. And of course, that's for those of you as old as I am, that harkens back to the TV series of the 70s. Anyway, this is the stuff of radical collective intelligence. Excuse me, RCI, which we provide a solid introduction to via a series of 5-minute videos below. And by the way, I haven't recorded those videos yet. I'm really looking forward to that. But it'll really make it clear exactly what radical collective intelligence is, how it works, et cetera, et cetera. Phase 3, refreeze the Arctic. This is the first objective to which we will apply our exponentially growing radical collective intelligence, simultaneously co-creating, refining, testing, and deploying a number of solutions spanning engineering, finance, politics, culture, media, PR, education, among other domains. Phase 4, more coming together. This is key. With the success of refreezing the Arctic, a significant percentage of humanity will be inspired to join our winning team. And with their support, phase 5, we will be able to grow vastly smarter still. We will expand radical collective intelligence exponentially with both increased membership and increased sophistication of the platform and the culture co-evolving with the community. Phase 6, heal Mother Earth as we transform our modality of life and our entire set of living arrangements, all supported by radical collective intelligence, continuously and extremely rapidly co-creating countless solutions, large and small, spanning all realms imaginable. A true, deep, radical transformation. And then radical collective intelligence, which I believe is the key. Since radical collective intelligence is proposed as a critical factor, at a minimum, to the above series of transformations, we'll lay out the fundamentals of radical collective intelligence through a series of short 5-minute instructional videos. So I'm just going to kind of go through very quickly the gist of each of these videos. The first one will be Introduction in Brain Swarming, pointing to the methodology developed by Dr. Tony McCaffrey and colleagues as published on the Harvard Business Review. So we'll introduce radical collective intelligence, then talk about brain swarming, and then talk about solutions as well as their intended and unintended consequences. And then the second video, we'll talk about conversations and what we call the toposphere of topics. All the taxonomies of topics, organized, structured. We'll talk about how that relates to what I call the solutions spaghetti factory. And that simply refers to all the intended and unintended consequences, both positive and negative, of any given solution. All that needs to be mapped in the toposphere. And then conversations, recording, transcription, indexing, and mapping. And then the fractal nature of topics and taxonomy, something I don't think I've ever talked about before in a serious way. The third one will be on information and intelligence, sort of the yin-yang of radical collective intelligence. And first we'll talk about the yin and yang of that, and then information mapping. See, information mapping, that's like, for example, mapping all peer-reviewed academic journal articles, mapping those to the toposphere, mapping all transcribed conversations to the toposphere. See, when we map this information to the appropriate places in the toposphere, and then human intelligence comes along to operate on that information, to the extent that information is complete and mapped in an intelligent way, the human intelligence will have immediate access to basically all the information that's out there that's relevant, so they can then operate on that information. And when I say operate on that information, I mean co-create new information, new mappings, new solutions, new topics, new perspectives, et cetera, et cetera. So we map the information, and then intelligence basically expands it. And then the flip side is what I call intelligence mapping. That's mapping the right people to the right conversations within the toposphere. Bringing the right mixes of people together so they in turn can assemble the mapped information into solutions. So really, two things need to happen for new information and new solutions to be created. We need to map the relevant information to the appropriate conversations, and we need to map the people, the appropriate people to the appropriate conversations. So there's basically all this mapping and lining up so that conversations can happen. So here's a real simple example. You see this document that I'm screen sharing? This is information that I mapped and then brought to this conversation. And now we are operating on this information. We're reading it, we're analyzing it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And then video 4, solutions, modeling, and optimization. Solutions, and more solutions. Where does it end? We'll talk about that. The short answer is, with using global holistic modeling in combination with an appropriate optimization layer, we will be able to determine what the best solutions are that we need to implement, which solutions we don't want to implement, and the order in which we want to implement solutions. So anyway, with that, that's the first pass at bullets for the manifesto. I'm happy to review any part of this, or we can just let it be and move on. But in any case, I'm going to go off of screen sharing. And back to you, Michael. Any comments, thoughts, questions, etc.? Okay, you're on mute, Michael, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, that is, I think, the main message, right, that we've been driving home. And I think the most important part of all that is this space we're co-creating, wherein, you know, there's a certain range of possibilities that hitherto did not exist, and that caused a lot of anxiety, a lot of despair, and that continues to do so. But when people don't feel like they have an out, right, they begin to get desperate, and we've seen that time and again, and it's been manifested, right, in myriad of ways, right? This sense of, you know, hopelessness, that leads to the kind of action that has been causing some very serious problems, not only as of late, but in society throughout history. But along with the exponential nature of the problems we face, we also have the exponential possibility, or the possibility of exponential, problem solving, of coming up with solutions. It's kind of excuse me for saying so, but kind of a heyday for solutionaries, because it's at that very point in time when the solutions seem so, overwhelming, that we realize that the possibility for answering the call has become, that much more powerful. And frankly, that's what we need to focus on. That's what we are focusing on, even at the risk of being not essentially being open to the possibilities, right, instead of the improbabilities, and even the impossibilities, because those have not yet been definitively put to rest. We cannot say one way or another, without having tried, what the end result may be, right, let alone what it will be. And I think it's within that space that we do our best work. We're focused on the possible, right? Which by definition, right, is what is possible. I mean, that sounds so redundant, but if somebody said, well, hey, utopia is impossible, how could we ever reach it, right? Just for example, right? Well, first of all, it's kind of like, well, utopia in and of itself just means a place that doesn't even exist, right? But in terms of what we're striving for. We're striving for the best possible outcome, right? Which, by definition, means that it is possible, right? You can't argue against like the best possible outcome by saying it's impossible, right? That's not what we're focused upon. I'm not saying that that's not worth talking about, but um, this is purely existing in the realm of solutions, right? Of possible solutions. So if it ain't possible, right, we're not even talking about it. Or as soon as it's rendered, implausible, it gets sort of pushed to the, to the periphery. Um, so I suppose this is sort of a rant against the naysayers, to the extent that there's sort of a problematic framing, right, of the denial, right? Because it's sort of saying that, oh, we shouldn't be focusing on the possible because it's impossible, right? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
We're aiming, what we're aiming for is the best possible outcome.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. And we won't know what's possible until we give it our all. That's the bottom line, right? Because
Yeah,
there.
because it's empirical, right?
That's right.
It's an empirical experiment. I mean, we're good old fashioned, Anglo Americans rolling up our sleeves and saying we don't know until we try, because you haven't, you haven't disproved the hypothesis until you've run the experiment.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep. Very well said, Michael. Very well said. All right. Shall we move on to the next point in the agenda? And as we introduce more stuff, it's just more opportunity we're just kind of enriching the pot, and then we can keep coming back and looking at whatever angle we want. So I'm not shutting down topics, I'm just expanding them. So the next point in the agenda next section is my proposed framework for exactly what we need to focus on in order to refreeze the Arctic. And so I'll do a screen share and do some drawing. Yeah, excuse me. Excuse me, I need a cough. But the first point is this. We are on, obviously, it goes without saying, an extremely perilous path right now. And, pick your metaphor, but I mean, we're, 100 yards from the edge of Niagara Falls in a rowboat without a paddle, seemingly. And so, and I've talked about this before. There's always something we can do. So there is a range of possibilities about what's possible. Now, you may take the position that range is extremely limited. Yeah, we may be able to deviate our course 1 meter to the left or right, but we're still pretty much dead center, plus or minus 1 meter relative to the center of the river about to go over Niagara Falls, right? Or if you think more is possible, fine. Let's expand the realm of possibility. But whatever the realm
Yeah.
of, yeah, go ahead.
And will you render that a bit more explicit, just in terms of, let's say, the increase in global temperature?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's an analogy, but it's an analogy begging to be explained, because actually the reality is not far afield from the analogy itself in terms of the amount of leeway with that we have.
Right, right, right. Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I'm thinking what you're thinking. The analogy is, going over the waterfall is passing kind of the final major tipping point. The melting of Arctic ice, for example, could be one of those tipping points. In other words, there's a number of tipping points that could set this off on just a crazy, cascading, accelerating temperature rise. Um, Wait, is someone trying to call me? If so, I'm going to have to. Uh, Adam's trying to call me. All right, let me just. Well, um,
Yeah, I saw that as well. I think Adam's just trying to join the hangout.
yeah, he must be trying to join the hangout. Well, I mean, I emailed him the link, so anyway, anyway, hopefully he'll figure it out. But you see, going over the waterfall, the edge of Niagara Falls, is bashing through any one of those final tipping points, whether it's losing the Arctic ice, losing global dimming, the ocean maxing out on how much carbon it can absorb, the predicted 50 gigaton burst of methane. Any one of those things happens, and we're arguably toast. Why? Because it would then trigger the other, um, you know, uh, runaway tipping points. So it
Yeah,
reminds me. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, speaking of this reminds me of an IMAX I saw. I went to, the kind of IMAX theaters, which are like three-dimensional. It's kind of like, you know, uh, geometric, like half dome that you're sitting inside of.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, like an we call it Omnimax
an
theater.
Omnimax, yeah. So I went to one of those when I was a child in New Mexico, not far from White Sands. Actually, I think it was in White Sands, and it was that of the Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls, going over it, going over the cliff, right? And there you are, experiencing as like an individual this climactic fall, right? And you do experience the fall. Um, Collectively, that's the same thing we're talking about here, but it's hard to imagine as an individual, right? But the individual example actually.
You went on mute, Michael. Okay, Michael, you dropped off. Um, anyway, Michael will rejoin, I'm sure. Actually, people keep trying to connect. Let me just take 1 minute and call one of those guys and see what I can do about that. Okay. I don't know what happened with Michael, but presumably he'll rejoin at some point. So let me just kind of draw a picture of what I'm talking about um, in terms of. Oh, I didn't actually connect my thing yet, so let me connect that. Sorry for the delays, everyone. Hey, Michael, welcome back.
Hey,
Yeah.
so any action on your end? Because I was just hanging out with Miles.
Ah, so you accepted his call. Did you explain to him that he needs to click on the link that I sent out via email?
Yes, yeah, I said that he could go to Hangouts and click on ongoing Hangouts, or I told him that you would send out a link. So you've already done that.
Oh yeah, I sent that out half an hour ago.
So I just joined by way of the link. Uh, so we'll see
Okay.
what happens.
Okay, great, great. Thank you for doing that. I also called Adam.
Yeah,
Uh,
I saw him trying to join as well.
right, that's why I called him. Okay, good. So let's just get back to the main thread then, and they'll join us as they can, I'm sure. But I want to do a screen share and just kind of draw a picture of what I'm talking about. So, let's say that, this is the pathway. Can you see my drawing, Michael? Let's say this is the, Niagara Falls. And here
Yeah,
we are.
I see it. Yeah.
Okay, great. And here we are in a little boat, and we're going to the edge. And, when we go over the edge, you know what that means? It means we're going to crack up and die at the bottom. So there is I argue, there is a range of possibilities of where we can go from here, right? If we paddle like mad, we might be able to go a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, depending on your perspective. Or we may be able to go a lot to the right or a lot to the left. And depending on your perspective, we may actually be able to get off of the river entirely and onto dry land uh, and on a path to some form of safety. And that's either possible or it's impossible. And we may never know, except if we achieve it, then we'll know that it was possible. And if we just go over the waterfall, then we don't actually know that it was impossible. We just know that we didn't achieve it. So, and, all due respect to every analysis, scientific study, um, uh, field study, collecting data, analyzing that data, what have you, all due respect to all of that, we simply, I posit that nobody knows what's possible and impossible until it's been accomplished. Period. We just don't know. We don't know what the effects of large scale geoshading and other forms of geoengineering would be. We just don't know. There's a lot of speculation and hypothesis and even study that suggests that certain forms of geoengineering would have some very negative unintended consequences. Totally get it. But what could possibly be more negative than total annihilation of life on Earth? So I'm saying now is actually a great time to first analyze, design, and model to the extent that we can before deploying it in the field. But now is a great time to do such, at least at a minimum, virtual experimentation with geoengineering before we write it off completely. And who knows, our analysis may say that it's worth a try. So there's a lot that we can do. And anyway, that's just sort of context for where I want to go next. Where I want to go next, and I'll do more screen share, I want to welcome Adam, who's joined us. Welcome, Adam. I'm glad you're on. I know you're muted, and I know you're in your car, so chime in when you feel like it, and otherwise don't worry about it. Let me again screen share. And so with that as context, what I propose is that, all right, so if this is the waterfall journey that we're on, the waterfall's ahead of us, it looks terrible. We need to at least have, by the way, I'm just gonna, in this section, I'm going to go through what I think we need to accomplish to refreeze the Arctic. It's going to sound like and feel like I'm going in a much broader direction, but it ultimately leads to refreezing the Arctic. So the first thing I posit we need to have is some form of, I'm just going to call it a utopian aim, or direction, or true north, if you will. Right? In other words, yes, this is the path that we've been on. It's been terrible. By default, we're heading towards the edge of the waterfall. That will be even more terrible. And we have, at a minimum, a dream of heading in a whole new direction. Whether that's possible or not, we don't know, but that's where we want to get to. So the first thing one key thing I'm positing that we need is this utopian aim, or true north. The second thing we need is a pathway to get there. That's what this green arrow is. It's a pathway to get to that utopian true north. And that pathway, of all the pathways that are available to us, the default pathway, the pathway that makes it even worse, or anything in between our current default and utopia, this is a whole spectrum of possibilities. Whichever pathway we choose, it must include, in the very early stages, and I'll just insert it right here, in the very early stages, it must include refreezing the Arctic. Because if we lose the Arctic ice, we lose the planet. So the pathway has to include refreezing the Arctic, and I'm just going to make another series of black dots, which I'll just summarize as, putting out critical fires, like the melting of Arctic ice, like cleaning up the ocean, like capturing or in some way sequestering the methane that's being released all over the planet, notably in the far north. So there's a bunch of things that we have to do. I think it's fairly well established that refreezing the Arctic is the very first and most urgent of those. But the bottom line is, whatever pathway we take, it must include, and I'll just put number 3 here, putting out critical fires that are absolutely urgent. As we put out those fires one by one, if we're able to put out those fires, still a big if, that will incrementally take us on a path towards this utopian destination, or this true north. So those are 3 key things that we need to basically, we need to design. We need to design the utopian true north. We need to design the path, and we need to design all of the solutions for putting out the critical fires. Now, there's one other thing that we need, I'm just going to depict these in a slightly different way right now. Imagine, imagine that you've got, let's call this, I don't know, the design phase. One, the utopian, I'll just call it utopia. Two, the pathway to get there. And three, I'll just draw like flames. And three is we need to put out these fires. Okay? All right. Now, in order to, well, let me put it this way. Encapsulating all three of those and reinforcing, inspiring all three of those, we need a fourth thing, which I call a new story for humanity. We humans run on stories. If we're going to muster the people to come together and design this new utopia, and if we're going to muster the people together to design this new pathway to get us there, including putting out the fires, we are going to need to enroll all of these people in a new story, a story that is inspiring, right? And, it's a real toughie because in the midst of all this tragedy, how the heck do you find inspiration? How do you find inspiration to get out of bed in the morning and join a video conference and do something positive and constructive rather than negative and destructive, like, like a lot of the negative comments that we get? How do you, the answer is you need a story. So what is that story? Well, guess what? That needs to be designed as well. Somebody needs to design that news story, or some collective intelligence needs to design it. And speaking of which, so we need to design all these things. So encapsulating all of these is a fifth thing, which is radical collective intelligence. We need to put together and perfect and expand and complete a radical collective intelligence, empowering us to design and co-create all of these elements and then put them into action. So these are the 5 things that I posit we need to design and create if we are going to refreeze the Arctic. Going on mute for a moment, and love to hear your thoughts.
Hey, Jamin? Jamin? Jamin?
Yes, Michael, I can hear you. Please go.
Okay.
I was
You're on mute.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I have something to say, but I'm also waiting to see whether Adam and Miles have joined us. Does it sound like it?
So Adam has joined us.
Yeah, Adam has joined us.
He's also A, on mute, and B, in a car. So he may only be listening in, but he's definitely online. Miles has not joined yet. Back to you, Michael.
Yeah, so let's take those 5, right? However we divvy them up. I say start with the story itself. Instead of building up to it. It may seem kind of a minor point, maybe it is, but basically it's kind of like, what is the new story, right? And then we start looking for the various plot details, right? We start constructing the plot. If it's a counter narrative, which is what it is, it's a counter narrative, then we immediately start looking for, okay, what is the predicament, right? The problem, and how are we to come up with a solution or a set of solutions to the problem, right? Which leads us to RCI. But in between the two, I say we begin with the end in mind, right? Which is this story of solving the problem. And then we take up the various, possibilities, but all to be, and this is not even the conclusion. I would say the climax is RCI, right? And then the solution to the extent, well, the conclusion to the extent that we can come up with one at this point, because it's a bit early to come up with a conclusion. But in terms of the story itself, right?
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Yeah, just a moment there. Is that Adam? Yeah, just a moment. So RCI becomes the protagonist in the story, right?
What?
The collective protagonist in lieu of the individual one. Go ahead, Adam. Can you hear us?
Adam, are you trying to say something? Okay, who knows what's going on with Adam, but I'm sure he'll chime in. So, sure. Michael, I'm totally in agreement with what you said. In fact, oh my, someone's trying to call in again. Let me just deal with this. Okay, so in fact, I would love to this was actually the next item in the agenda anyway, was a first draft ethos and news story for humanity, in which radical collective intelligence indeed becomes, I think, the main protagonist, you said. So Michael, are you game for me to read through this, talk through it? Let me just show you what I've got here. These are a bunch of notes I wrote in the last couple of days about the story. So I'll just kind of be riffing based on this. By the way, Michael, we can't see you on video anymore.
Oh, yeah. And I was also wondering, I hear people trying to join us, call in and such. Are you getting that as well?
Yes, I am. And let me address that briefly so we can get back on track. So first, Adam tried to dial in, and then I called him on the cell phone and explained that he needed to click on the appropriate link, and so he did that, and now he's in. Miles keeps trying to dial in, but bottom line, they're not clicking on the right link. Something is up, but I don't want to spend any more cycles on this video conference talking about we're trying to dial in.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. But at the same time, I mean, it's kind of the point of what we're doing to make sure that these people are able to join, that are trying to join, and to address that problem up front.
Yeah, it's a balance. I mean, like, we could take the next 15 minutes and I could, try to contact Miles and find out what the problem is, but then just imagine the experience. Okay, Miles has finally joined, so it's a moot point. Miles, welcome. And Miles, so here's what was happening on our end. We saw you trying to call us. So I kept getting these independent video conference calls from you while we were on this video conference. So please tell us what was going on your end that caused that.
Well, sorry, that's my thumb. I seem to be, when I use my iPad for Hangouts, and the link that you sent in Google Gmail didn't actually connect for some reason, and then anyway, I would go on to other links that would say open the app. Well, I have the app already, and anyway, I'm here now, so that's good. Sorry about that.
And how did you manage to join?
Well, I actually ended up going to Facebook and liking and following Jamin, and then seeing his link there, and then it finally kicked over and opened up the app that I have had on the iPad all the time.
The Google Hangout app?
Yeah, the Google Hangout app.
Okay, yeah.
I'm surprised.
I find myself, because I use an iPad as well for these Hangouts, that more often than not, I'm not able to join with a link. And this is good information for Jamin as well. although I was able to join this time.
Often, more often than not.
Let's see. Can we get people to mute their microphones? Chris and Adam.
Well, although I was able to join this time.
Often. Anyway.
Hey, Chris, A, welcome, and B, would you kindly mute your microphone while you're not talking, like right now? Do you know how to mute your microphone, Chris?
I don't want to listen.
If you don't, I'll tell you. No, wait, I need to say something, you guys. I'm trying to communicate something with Chris right now. Chris, number one, I'll tell you.
Yeah, no, I don't know how to do that.
Okay, let me tell you how to do it. So, Chris, if you move your mouse on the screen, you should see about 6 buttons at the very top of the screen. Do you see those 6 buttons at the top of the screen? Your mouse on the screen. You should see about 6 buttons at the very top of the screen. Do you see those 6 buttons at the top of the screen?
More or less.
Okay.
So,
on the bottom of the screen when you
which one am I looking for? Oh, right. That one. Okay.
So one of those 6 buttons
muted everything.
Is one of those 6 buttons, Chris, is a microphone, and it toggles it on and off. So one of those 6 buttons
muted everything.
Is one of those 6 buttons, Chris, is a microphone, and it toggles it on and off. So one of those 6 buttons muted everything. Is one of those 6 buttons, Chris, is a microphone, and it toggles it on and off. So one of those 6 buttons muted everything. Is one of those 6 buttons is a microphone. Okay, Chris, I just took the liberty of muting you because the fact that you weren't muted was just completely frying the audio for everyone.
Oh, wow, Jamin, you're able to mute other people's mics.
Yeah, I'm able to mute because the fact that you weren't muted was okay, Chris, are you able to mute? Chris, are you able to mute yourself?
Wow, Jamin, you're able to mute.
Are you able to mute yourself, Chris? Because I just muted you. Because the fact that you couldn't mute, that you weren't muting your microphone was totally screwing up the audio. Are you able to mute yourself, Chris? Because I just muted you.
I'm not sure.
The fact that you couldn't mute, that you weren't muting your microphone. Okay, Chris, I'm just going to keep muting you.
Apologies.
As long as you're unmuted, we just get massive echo. And if I could see that you were muting yourself, I wouldn't mute you. But because I can't, you're not able to mute yourself, I'm going to mute you.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about oh, echo.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Adam, we can hear you. We can hear you.
May I make a suggestion that anyone who is on a cell phone, just use your icon. That may be causing interference. Besides muting.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Let me unmute Chris and just check in with him real quick. Okay, Chris, it looks like you've mastered the mute button. Is that correct? Can you unmute and say hello?
I think those icons finally appeared on my screen. They had not been up there previously that you were talking about. So now I think I have them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Awesome, Chris.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. All right. Yeah, sometimes you just need to like move your mouse or even click on the screen and then they appear. But if you're just like waiting for them to appear, they don't necessarily appear. But you got to move your mouse and click on the screen and then they'll appear. All right. So welcome, everyone. Really glad to see you all. And thanks also for the folks who are watching live. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next phase, which is to read kind of provide sort of an initial draft of the new story for humanity that we will need to empower defining a new true north, a utopian aim that we can get to, defining and designing the pathway to get there, defining and designing all the solutions to put out the fires that we need to put out, speaking metaphorically, including refreezing the Arctic. So this news story, so here goes. I'm just going to riff, and then after I'm done riffing on it, I'll go on mute and love to hear everyone's thoughts on that. So the news story is this first draft of it. It starts with where we came from. You know, how did we get into this mess, right? So, you know, we were all a bunch of hunter-gatherers in the beginning, and that really was the Garden of Eden. And, you know, we lived in harmony with nature, was in balance, and we were in balance with nature. And then, little by little, and then increasingly, with increasing acceleration, the following 5 or 6 big things started to emerge and evolve. One of those is, I'll just call it generally tools, right? We're a tool using species, so we started developing and mastering more and more tools and using more and more tools. For agriculture, for mining, for metals, for publishing and distributing and processing information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So tools is one of the biggies. Another biggie is power, sources of power. We tapped into sources of power, including notably oil and gas and notably renewables. But the defining thing of both of those is it gave us access to all this power, you know, physical power that we didn't have, to power machinery, you know, to move earth, to till the soil, to do all kinds of stuff, to mine, to build, to, you know, make things like cement for concrete. A third big thing is what I'm going to call, it's really 2 things rolled in one, a yin and yang. And this is partly a pitch to Adam, but it's money and the modality of life that comes with money. Okay, the modality of life. What is this modality of life? We talked about it earlier on the Hangout. We simply call it, let's just call it hoarding, to give it a word. And it's characterized by the slicing and dicing of nature and hoarding the spoils of the kill, right? So this addiction to money, this greed, this addiction to hoarding, and this modality of hoarding drives us, otherwise well-intentioned humans, to destroy nature, chop down trees, mine and frack, sell everything we can for more money, and hoard the spoils. And then a fourth big thing is modern agriculture, which is closely associated with all the others. And, you know, a lot more stuff as well. But I'm really identifying those key things that put us on a path of transitioning ourselves from basically Garden of Eden to the hell on earth that we're living currently. Now, but long before we got to this present hell on earth, you know, back in the, I don't know, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, you know, everything seemed great. Hey, we got more power, we got more tools, we got modern agriculture, we can store grain and ensure that we can go on living, and that's a good thing. And, you know, so at first it kind of seemed like all these, you know, the tools, power, money and modality and agriculture, which I abbreviate TPMMAG, TPMAG, tools, power, money and modality and agriculture. At first it seemed like those were relatively good things, right? But over time, and this is a part of the story that I need to refine, but over time, we went into overshoot. All these things, tools, power, money and modality and agriculture, modern agriculture, pushed us into overshoot. It caused population to rise exponentially. And along with that, the destruction of more and more life and resources. and accelerating spread of the devastation caused by humanity, all the way to the far reaches of the globe, carried by globalization, money and the modality and tools. So, and that's brought us to this clinically insane suicidal death spiral that we're in the midst of right now. And to the point that humanity has become a cancer on Mother Earth, and specifically a cancer of the skin. Think the biosphere, like the skin of Mother Earth. The lungs, lung cancer, the atmosphere of Mother Earth. The circulatory systems, the cancer of the circulatory systems, the water, the air, all the flows of nutrients, resources, etc. Driving countless brother and sister species to extinction. So we are this cancer that's extinguishing other species with our overshoot. Now, so that's, kind of the first half of the story, which is basically a story of decline, overshoot, and destruction. Adam, your image there on video is so compelling. I'm putting that as the focus of the screen. But in fact, this is kind of a picture of overshoot. We're looking at tools. There's vehicles in the background. We're burning wood. So, wow, you can see that guy's or person splitting wood there. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so that's the first half of the story. It gets us to, this low point where humanity, we're literally a cancer. Well, so what are we supposed to do? Like kill ourselves? This is the low point in the story. And then we rebound upwards from there. So what does the rebound upwards look like? Well, a bunch of folks from all quarters, from all parts of the world, figured out the problems caused by this overshoot, fueled by tools, power, money, modality, and agriculture. And these people who figured out the nature and essence of the overshoot and all the problems that it's causing, each of these people, ourselves included, had a part of the solution, right? But no one of us had the entire solution to these problems. And solution to what? To the question, how do we save as much of life on Earth as possible and ensure that complex life is viable for the long haul? Well, and again, this is on with the story. These people then started coming together to discuss and co-create the holistically complete and optimal set of solutions that we would need in order to solve our problems. And they, including all of us, these pioneers, determined that we, the humans, were not the cancer per se, but the cancer is definitely of humanity. This deadly mix of tools, power, money, modality, and modern agriculture, that deadly concoction, when mixed with humanity, created the problem and turned us into a cancer. These problems, so the humans are not the cancer, but the cancer is of humanity, among other reasons, because humans invented the tools, the power, the money and modality, and the agriculture. And so talking about solutions, so these pioneers came together and set about finding those solutions for exercising this cancer from Mother Earth without killing the patient. And to the contrary, staying true to the aim of saving as much of life on Earth as possible. So we want to get rid of the cancer, and we want to save life. And and that's this coming together is really the key turning point, because we've been very fragmented and separate. And then, radical collective intelligence then, becomes part of the story, because as we came together, we realized that, just coming together and talking is not enough. I need to just answer this real quick. Carry on, anyone else who wants to talk at the moment. I'll be right with you.
Yeah, sure. So since we have this moment here, is Adam, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I just wanted to double check to make sure that everybody was able to hear and respond. Looks like Damien may be off his call. Miles, are you there as well? Can you respond as well? Okay.
Hello. Yeah. Good to see everybody.
Okay. Good. Everybody's
I'll just jump in. It's one of the things I think to remember is that we all have a unique perspective to manifest on this journey, and to encourage everybody's unique manifestation of solution, and I think it'll all connect up eventually on this platform of radical collective intelligence. So I have a particular perspective and context, and initially it might not make any sense to some of you when I start rolling it out, just like Adam's idea of leaving money strikes people as not making any sense. But if we give these things time and bring all these resources that Jamin is organizing for us to work collectively, contribute and encourage, it's going to make a difference for sure. So I'll just mute having said that.
Okay, thank you, Miles.
Yeah, so anyway, we're talking about, how do we roll this all up into a cogent, concise story, the essence of which can be relayed in 30 seconds or less, right? This new story for humanity.
I have something to add. Can you hear me?
Please, yeah, go ahead, Adam. We can hear you. Go ahead. Adam, yes, please go ahead,
okay.
Adam.
If you can hear me okay, I'll go ahead.
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay. I just have a little anecdote to add to the storyline. And you were speaking of cancer and stuff. So a man goes to the doctor and finds out that he's terminally ill from cancer. And the doctor says, you're going to die, and there's basically no hope. So he may as well get ready to die. So the guy goes home, and he's all depressed and everything. And somebody says, well, why don't you go see this naturopath? So the guy goes to the naturopath, and the naturopath asks him a bunch of questions, and looks at the man, and then he goes away, and he comes back a little while later, and he hands this man a pamphlet of papers. He says, this is your plan. He says, if you follow this plan, it is physically possible for you to be healed. If you don't follow the plan, you don't have any possibility of being healed. But if you follow the plan, as hard as it is, as ridiculous as it may sound, it is physically possible for you to be healed. I'm not guaranteeing that you will be healed, because it has to do with whether Mother Nature smiles on you or not. But it is physically possible. So I go by the adage, if it's physically possible, it is possible. And so that's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Yep, totally agree, Miles. And in fact, you know, for example, when it comes to refreezing the Arctic, it is physically possible to refreeze the Arctic. It is physically possible to deploy millions of square kilometers of reflective material in whatever form. And there's a lot of options for doing it, each of which is physically possible. So we've got lots of physically possible options for actually refreezing the Arctic. Whether we do it or not is really up to us, but it is physically possible. Now, having said that, any comments on the story itself that I just laid? You know, the overall story is the story of decline and overshoot, and then people coming together, realizing each of which has some specific pieces to contribute, and now we need to come together to put the pieces together, and off on a whole new path for utopia and exercising the cancer. I'm going to go on mute. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the story is sound as you tell it. Everybody has a story to tell, right, from the perspective, as somebody said on this hangout. And I think by starting with the story, by saying, hey, look, you know, we're in search of a new story for humanity, right? In a sense, it's a very old, you know, story, an ancient story. But at the same time, it's taken on new significance. It's taken on a new sense of urgency, and I think that having these conversations is basically a way to tell the story in different ways, right? So we start with a preliminary story, a story of a planet and its people in peril. Let's just face it, right? That's like the basic premise. But then there's any number of stories, both for how that's affecting humanity, right? Life on Earth, but also the potential for solutions, right? Those are all part of the story. And so it's as though we start with a story, but it's not this. It's not the story to end all stories. In fact, it's the story that's going to generate any number of other stories, right? And each one of those stories entails a different set of problems to be solved, right? But they're all a part of that meta narrative, right? That ultimately says that we're in trouble. We have to act, you know, collectively. And if we do so, there's at least the possibility of a sort of, you know, salvation for people on the planet. Because right now, the story seems to be one of impoverishment, degradation, despair, right? There's a lot of different versions of the story, but basically the story of a suffering world, right? But we're open to any number of other stories that help to clarify the situation. And each one of those stories contains, you know, to the extent that it's a story, you know, with a narrative arc, right? That's going to lead to some sort of satisfactory conclusion. And that's why I say, you know, start with the story, because the story is only going to multiply. But there's a meta story, right? A meta narrative. And that's what's the most, you know, important of all, and not coincidentally the most, you know, proverbial of all. And is simply a story of salvation, right? To survive and thrive in the face of the planetary threat that we face.
Yeah, good stuff, Michael. You know, I would add to that. that it's, the meta narrative, or just, the high level of the story, decline and then rebound. It's also a story of separation and then reunification, because along with money and the modality of hoarding, that drove us to separate ourselves from each other and from nature. And now, as we are coming together, like we're doing on this video conference, it's a story of reunification. It's a story of saying, hey, wait a second, not only did we overshoot, but we picked the wrong modality, a modality that separated us and caused us immense suffering and psychosis, because we're not meant to be separate. We're meant to be together. So now it's a reunification that brings us together so that we can write our new story, and create a new path within what's possible, within the realm of what's possible. Going on mute. Okay. I would propose that we go to the next item on the agenda, which is a few words about solutions. Okay. And I think I might just do a screen share for this because it's a lot of words, but there's certain words I want to focus on. So let me screen share, and feel free to jump in, everyone, even while I'm screen sharing. Hey, Jeff. Good. Hey, buddy, I'm on a video conference right now that's being publicly broadcast. Can I call you back in a bit? Appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks. Okay, so here is a few words about solutions. In order to refreeze the Arctic, we need engineering solutions, right? I'm just going to highlight these things in yellow as we go. In order to finance these engineering solutions, we need financial solutions. Now, Adam may contest that, and I absolutely respect that, but let me just get through this initial first pass. In order to influence, for lack of a better word, force the hand of also comes to mind. Governments, in other words, whether to influence these governments or force their hand, the governments of the world to participate in these solutions, including the design, finance, and deployment of military forces as needed to implement these solutions for refreezing the Arctic, we need political solutions. Solutions that will either influence or force the hand of government. In order to co-create political solutions, we need the active, passionate participation of a significant number of people so that we can all co-create all of the memes, messages, PR, marketing, et cetera, and other stuff in this broad realm. Let's just call these communication solutions. Those will basically need to precede the political solutions. Why? Because we need these communication solutions to help build our movement into a thriving, ever-growing global movement, which in turn is vital in order to co-create and, more importantly, implement the aforementioned political solutions. In other words, no massively popular global movement, no political solutions. Another way of saying it is, it is hard to imagine forcing the hands of national leaders with only a few tens of thousands of committed members. We need hundreds of millions, billions of members worldwide. And in order to truly nail all the preceding two bullets, in other words, the political solutions and the communication solutions, we need to co-create a truly badass new story for humanity. And of course, that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And as detailed in my proposed framework, which I covered earlier on this video conference, in order to really truly create a badass new story for humanity, we need to master all 5 of the elements of the aforementioned framework, which I'll just flash up on the screen again real quick. All 5 of these elements. What is the definition of utopia that we're aiming for? What's the path to get there? Does it include putting out the fires? The news story, and radical collective intelligence itself. So, back to here. We need to master all 5 of those elements. Now, let's just do a quick review. We've got engineering solutions, financial solutions, political solutions, communication solutions, a new story for humanity, and the other elements of the framework, the utopia, the pathway to get there, etc. Each of these sets of solutions is just that, a set of solutions. Imagine the number of actual specific solutions within each given set. Take engineering solutions. There's going to be so many solutions and components to those solutions that need to be invented. Each of these sets of solutions has myriad solutions contained therein, like the political solutions. We need political solutions for the blue states, for the red states, for the Chinese, for the Russians, for, you know, all countries around the world. We need myriad solutions in each category. The numbers are staggering. We need huge numbers of solutions. And that all this leads me to what for me is the inevitable conclusion that if we are serious about refreezing the Arctic in time, we need to get super serious about radical collective intelligence. For it is really, really hard for me to imagine building out and implementing, ultimately like a Swiss watch with myriad parts, the entire holistic set of solutions implemented in just the right order. It is a truly daunting task, especially when you consider the myriad dysfunctions within governments, media, culture, inequities and human suffering, academia, religion, the constraints and manic making of our entire set of living arrangements, etc. In other words, in the midst of all this dysfunctionality, we need to come up with a large number of really awesome solutions. This leads me to the conclusion, and I may be a bit redundant here, but radical collective intelligence is absolutely vital. Therefore, we must promote and evangelize radical collective intelligence with near religious fervor. Even if people laugh at us, seek to humiliate us, etc., we must stick to our guns and make the dream and promise of radical collective intelligence a reality. With that, I'll go back on video and open it up. Going on mute. Love to hear all your thoughts.
All right, I pulled over and I'll jump in for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Adam.
All right.
Absolutely.
Back in the 90s when Russia dissolved,
Chris here, absolutely behind the idea. I think that's maybe the only solution we have. How you get all of those.
I pulled over and I'll jump in for a second.
Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Adam.
All right.
Sorry, Chris. Adam was talking, but after Adam finishes, then I'll hand it to you, Chris. Go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Okay, back in the 90s, Russia dissolved, and Cuba ended up with like a 50% loss of their oil supply. And Cuba's set up a little different than the United States. I mean, obviously, we're controlled basically by corporations and a corporate government. But Cuba was controlled by Fidel Castro. So with that kind of government, he was able to handle the situation. And basically, he told his people to go home and start planting every piece of bare land you can plant. Start planting crops. Now, his people survived that loss of oil, and they came through it, and they were healthy. You know, they didn't starve to death. And so I think that's kind of a something to think about, how they did it and how they were able to move and make it happen.
Yeah, Cuba was on a like over $10 million per day habit of the Soviet Union as their sort of nanny benefactor. And so when, mostly in the form of oil and other critical resources, but also in the form of cash. And so when the Soviet Union collapsed, boom, that supply line was cut off. So it was transformational for Cuba. But that's a great example, Adam. I'm glad you brought that up. Chris, please jump in, Chris. Love to hear what you have to say. Your microphone is muted, Chris. Love to hear what you have to say.
My apologies for earlier having appeared to jump in. I have about a 10 or 12 second delay here, so it is what it is.
Your microphone is muted, Chris. Love to hear what you have to say. Chris, your microphone is muted once again. With all due respect to the delay, I'm just going to mute everybody, mute except for Chris. And Chris, just take the floor. Go for it.
Again, my apologies. It's a delay. I don't know why it's there.
Chris, your microphone is muted once again. With all due respect to the delay, I'm just going to mute everybody. And Chris, just take the floor. Go for it.
Again, my apologies. It's a delay. I don't know why it's there.
Chris, your microphone is muted once again. With all due respect to the delay, I'm just going to mute everybody.
So.
And Chris, just take the floor. Go for it.
Again, my apologies. It's a delay. I don't know why it's there.
Chris, your microphone is muted once again. With all due respect to the delay, I'm just going to mute.
So hopefully we're live now. I think the Cuba example was spectacular. And now I'm getting feedback, so I'm hearing myself and other things. My apologies. I'm gonna mute out. I think the Cuba example was spectacular. All right. Hopefully there's no feedback here this time. I very much appreciate the idea that Jamin came up with for radical collective intelligence. I think it's really the only chance we have. How we get there with all of those various challenges, very good question. Feedback here. So, God, now I'm getting this feedback again. It's very hard to talk while I'm listening to myself talk. And I don't know if you're hearing that as well while I pick this up. But that's very challenging. So I'm going to mute out. We'll try and maybe get this figured out some other way. It's very hard. All right. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Awesome. Yeah, where do we go? It's very, very challenging. I had hoped that some individual action on my part might inspire some folks. I think that that message is slowly getting out there, but it's slow. And when the powers that be choose to suppress the story, as they have, you know, I went and got myself arrested and beat up by the police just to try to make a point to say, you're not going to ignore me. You think you can shut me up. You can't shut me up. They couldn't keep me in jail because they know they're wrong and I'm right. And if they take me to court, they lose. No question. Case is iron tight. So I need people to spread my story. I think my story is maybe what can be a motivator and help flip the trigger for a lot of people. There are people here in Lawrence who think I'm second coming of Christ. There are people in China who think I may be a bodhisattva. I have tried to write this story so that it could flip the script. These people framed me, but I am in a unique position in American history right now. My story can capture people's imagination. And if that
Chris,
can be
hear
what flips the trigger, then let's do this.
Or...
I have a lot of people who are saying, oh, you're an egomaniac. I would rather not be known. I'm not doing this for personal aggrandizement. I'm doing this because I believe
the rest of us
that shortly, if we don't change things, life on this planet goes away. And I will do anything in my power to see that that doesn't happen.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, buddy. Would love to, maybe we can do a video conference sometime where we hear your story. Or, you know, yeah, it needs to get out there. So maybe you could post a link to in the comment section of this video to your story so that folks can read it. I think that would be awesome. Anyway, I'll go on mute. Michael?
No, I know there's a significant lag between us and Chris there, and I was just trying to see whether Chris was able to hear us.
Yeah, he can hear us, but the problem is when he has his speakers on and his microphone on, it becomes this infinite mirrors echo chamber. So in order for him to talk, he had to actually turn off his speakers. So anyway, he can do one or the other. He can talk or he can listen, but he can't do both at the same time. Anyway, back to you, Michael.
Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that story as well. For sure. So anyway, what else you got, Damon?
Well, that was all that was on the agenda. And so I want to point out that, you know, radical collective intelligence, it's not my idea. It's a bunch of us coming together and standing on the shoulders of a bunch of giants going back deep into history. So I see radical collective intelligence as this gift that all of us have been given. And it's time to implement it to the max. And the more folks we have on board, the more powerful we can make it. So, you know, it just like you said, Michael, the ultimate protagonist in the story is radical collective intelligence. It is humanity coming together and really cracking open our potential for a massively higher form of intelligence than what we've exhibited today. Back to you, Michael.
And it represents a paradigm shift, right? Because so often, right, the protagonist is represented as an individual, right? And we're sort of trained to think that way. And of course, with what we're doing, we're not in any way erasing individualism. But at the same time, to wrap one's, you know, mind around new form of protagonist, right, that represents itself in terms of the collectivity itself, it represents a sort of revolutionary form of protagonist where we become the protagonist as a collectivity, right, as a unit, represented by any number of individual protagonists or heroes throughout history and various, legends and myths. We're still dealing with the age-old story of a world that needs to be saved, right? It's just that at this point in human history, it's become, more than a myth, more than an analogy, more than a metaphor. It's something that actually needs to be solved. And in so doing, we also need to embrace the protagonist as collective intelligence itself, right? The protagonist as the people, as opposed to, this or that person, which is important because, we're not waiting, for a messianic figure to appear. Instead, we're doing what we've always done, and that is coming together, assessing the situation, saying, we got a problem, and the only way we're going to come up with a solution is through a form of collective intelligence, right? That's what's radical about what we're doing. There's no other way to get to the root of the problem.
Yep, I agree. And I make the analogy, it's like humanity needs to become more like a beehive. And what's interesting about a beehive is the beehive has an operating system, a set of operating rules and signals and everything else that's built into the genetics of each individual bee. And they're all using the same operating system, so they know when to dance, they know when to scout, they know when to harvest, they know when to move, they know when to do all these things. Humanity needs to become a beehive, like a beehive. And to do that, we also need an operating system. And whereas the bees have the operating system built into them, we need to create and write our own operating system. And that is the entire set of information and communication technologies that constitutes radical collective intelligence. That's the operating system I'm proposing. And as quickly as we can embrace and complete the creation of this operating system and install it on every one of us and start using it, to that extent, we will maximize our odds of actually saving life on Earth, I believe. And so I think it is time for us to just do it, to just complete the radical collective intelligence, get everyone on board who we possibly can, and set it off on its exponential growth path, so that we have a real contender to abrupt climate change in this massively, exponentially growing form of collective intelligence that is at our fingertips here. So anyway, we've been on for a couple hours now, so I'd like to. I'm actually a bit under the weather, so I need to rest and get better. So I'd like to bow out for now. If any of you have more that you'd like to say, I'll just mute out myself and let you go with it, gentlemen. Or we can just terminate the video conference after everyone's had their final words. So I'm going to go on mute and let everyone say what they have to say.
I'd just like to say something. This is Adam. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I just want to say that I'm really grateful for Jamin and Michael for putting this radical collective intelligence together. And I think that, these are the people to do it. And I think, I don't know Michael that well, but I think I don't even know Jamin that well, but but from what I understand is he's pretty much an expert in this area. And so I'm just grateful that we have this platform now, and that we're going to be able to have it, because you look all over the internet and you can find, there's tons of videos and stuff out there that talk about the problems, but there's no place to go for the solutions. And we definitely need this place. And I think Jamin's the one to do it. And like Chris, I have kind of my own agenda that I'm working on, but I just think that, I want to go along, because I'm not the only voice in the world, and it has to be a group collective thing. That's why it's called radical collective intelligence. And so anyway, I'm just really grateful, and thank you very much, you guys. And I'll look forward to hearing you next time.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
As Jamin often points out, asks the pertinent question, where else, right, are you going to find an organization, right, that is taking on all of the problems holistically? If you go online, you can find any number of social networks, any number of platforms for this or that conversation, right? Reddit, obviously Twitter and Facebook, and a myriad of others in all of these specialized domains. But it's true that if I think, oh God, I got to go to that platform, which is like, solving the world's problems holistically. That's a category that's missing in action, right? Until now, because none comes to mind, whether they exist or not. None comes to mind. That has to be established in the minds, right, of the people when they think, solving the world's problems, right? As Donald Trump might say, how to make the world whole again, right? Where is that website? Is it Twitter? Is it Facebook? Well, obviously not, right? Those aren't even contenders, right? Where is it? There's a space that's wide open. That it's a vacuum, right? That we're filling, which of course has next to nothing to do with ourselves as individuals, but has to do with the very fact that it's either we solve this problem, or we don't, right? We solve this problem, or it doesn't get solved, right? There's no I did this, I did that. No, granted, people can take credit for this or that solution, but there's no way in which any one of us can take credit. But at the same time, we have to create that space and co-create, that solution. To me, that's what's so exciting. And we're at such a preliminary phase with it that everybody who wants to, give their effort, can do so in such a way where it really does matter, right? That's the ticket. People want to matter. People need to matter. And we just want to create a space where that's possible, right? Amidst all the competing, narratives or stories or whatever, all of the solutions that may be proposed, all of those need to go into the mix. All right. In a sense, it's kind of like good old, competition, essentially giving us this, plethora of possible solutions, right, to the problems we face. It's not going to be some monolith coming forward with the solution. We've seen that. I've been somewhat partial to it. It hasn't worked, right? Any number of, governments coming forward and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna speak for all people," you know, those kind of regimes have never done any good for humanity, right? This is a whole new paradigm that we're putting forth, one that is very vulnerable because it says, look, we don't have the answers. We're just creating the core, right, of a platform for solving the problem. So whether you come with a set of, you know, solutions or problems, whether you yourself are able to actually co-create the platform itself, right? You have some ideas about how to do that. That's we're dealing with something that was unimaginable, right? Unimaginable a generation or two ago.
Very well said, Michael and Adam. Yeah, there's nothing more to say. What there is now is to do. Now, part of the doing is saying. That's the conversational domain of Radish, which we're in the process of launching. And we'll have a lot more to say about that in upcoming videos. In fact, we've got a meeting coming up in about an hour and a half. So I need to take a nap between now and then get right back on it. But
very well.
Yeah.
Good,
all right.
Good hanging with you guys. I hope to, I don't know, Chris, that we've met before.
Chris was at the Share Club dinner. He was at the Share Club dinner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, he flew out from Kansas or Missouri, I forget which. Anyway, we'll be collaborating with Chris in the coming days. Anyway, Michael, would you be good enough to stay on after we stop broadcasting? I just want to check in with you on a couple of things. And other than that, yep. I thank everyone for joining and participating. And thank you all for watching. And thank you for being patient as we work through our technical and audio challenges. And with that, thanks again to everyone. Let's stop recording now, and we'll just have a quick check-in. All right. See you all in the next one. Arigato. Thank you.